Today I'm going to talk about a game that is fast, furious, and fun. Welcome to Khealos' Gaming Table. I'm Khealos. And on this channel I talk about tabletop RPGs, miniature war games, and GM tips. Dungeons & Dragons is the undisputed king of the realm. There's no one that even comes close, but they're not the only kingdom that's out there in the gaming space. There are quite a few others, such as World of Darkness or Pathfinder. One of the games that I really enjoy playing as well as running is Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is released by Pinnacle Entertainment Group and is written by Shane Lacey Hensley. In 2003, it did win Origin's Gamers' Choice Award for Best Role-Playing Game. One of the big selling points for Savage Worlds is that it is a settings-agnostic game system. You can run a traditional fantasy game, science fiction, Lovecraftian horror, modern superhero. Whatever your imagination calls for, you can build it in Savage Worlds. Despite it being settings agnostic, there are several official settings that have been released using the Savage Worlds game system, such as Rippers, Weird War II, and probably the most well-known, Deadlands. Like most role-playing games, Savage Worlds uses a combination of polyhedral dice. These dice range from a D4 to a D12. Unlike a lot of other game systems, these dice ace when you roll them, meaning that if you roll the maximum amount on the die, you roll it again and add the two together. If you roll the maximum again, you continue to do that until you stop rolling the maximum number. You can get some pretty crazy numbers depending upon how lucky you are. Player characters in Savage Worlds are called wild cards. Wild cards get an additional D6 called the wild die to roll in addition to whatever other die that they're rolling. The wild die can ace as well. You don't combine the trait or the skill roll along with your wild die roll. They're both independent, but they both ace. You do not roll the wild die with damage, however. Character creation in Savage Worlds is pretty straightforward. The first step to creating a character in Savage Worlds is to select your race. That is, if you are playing in a campaign that allows different races and not just all humans. These different races will have different flavors for role-playing, as well as different attribute boosts or deductions, or the inclusion of a specific edge or flaw. For example, if you pick a dwarf, they are very stout. They will start with a vigor of D6 as opposed to a D4. However, their pace is going to be 5 as opposed to a 6. After you pick your race, we'll move on to attributes. All your attributes will start at a base D4. You do have 5 points to increase each of your attributes. You would not be able to raise them beyond a D12. After you've selected your trait, you will have 15 points to purchase skills. To purchase a skill, you would spend a point in it, and you would get a D4, and then you can buy them up from there. Much like with the attributes, you're not going to be able to increase a skill beyond a D12. After you've selected all of your skills, you will move on to edges and hindrances. Edges and hindrances will give more flavor to the character, giving them boosts in certain areas or detractions in others. At the beginning of the game, you can take one major hindrance and up to 2 minor hindrances. A major hindrance is worth 2 points, and a minor hindrance is worth 1 point. You can use the points used from purchasing hindrances to raise an attribute or a skill, or you can choose an edge of equal value. After you've selected your edges and hindrances, you're going to go ahead and move on to gear. The GM might go ahead and assign you some gear depending upon what the campaign is about, but typically you're going to be given $500. There's a very comprehensive list in the book of equipment that you can purchase. The final step in character creation is going to be background details. You go ahead and write a background, any context you might have, a little bit of character history, anything that you can think of that drove you into the career of adventuring. Make it interesting, but it doesn't have to be very long. Wildcards have 5 attributes that define their physical and mental prowess within the game. The first of which is agility. Agility covers your nimbleness and your reflexes. Next we have smarts. Smarts is your raw intelligence and the ability to think on your feet. Next we have spirit. That covers your willpower, your ability to resist mental attacks. After that we've got strength. And that is just as it sounds, the amount that you can carry, the physical damage that you deal in hand-to-hand combat. Last we have vigor. Vigor is your endurance, and it's also the stat that you're going to use when you're looking to try and soak damage in combat. Along with your core attributes, you have several different derived stats. The first of which is parry, and that is 2 plus half your fighting skill. Your parry is the target number that somebody needs to hit you in hand-to-hand combat. The other big one is toughness, and that is 2 plus half your vigor. Toughness is the threshold that has to be exceeded before you start taking damage. There are numerous skills you can pick in Savage Worlds as well. The skill base in Savage Worlds is very broad, allowing you to pick a variety of skills and use them very creatively. Things such as shooting, fighting, or a base knowledge skill. Something that will help make your characters unique in Savage Worlds are edges and hindrances. There's a variety of different edges and hindrances. Some are physical, some are mental, some are societal. There are more than a few that are considered background edges, meaning that you can only take them during character creation. You can't buy them after the fact using experience points. Depending upon the edge, there might be a requirement, such as a skill at a certain level, or that your character be at a certain advancement place before you can take it. To become a caster in Savage Worlds, it isn't just enough to take a spellcasting class. You actually have to take the Arcane Background Edge. That edge gives you access to a pool of spell points as well as actual spells. You would then take those spell points to be able to cast spells each day. Unlike other games, spellcasting does require a skill roll, so the spell doesn't automatically go off. Wildcards get to roll their attribute or skill dice along with their wild die, both of those ace. However, if both come up as a 1, that is a critical failure. I encourage GMs to be very creative in how they handle these critical failures to make it interesting, not just your gun runs out of bullets or you lose your sword or something like that. Make it interesting. Another perk that wildcards get is the Benny. This allows a player to re-roll a failed die roll. They can spend a Benny to try and soak damage. Wildcards will start with 3 bennies at the beginning of the game. They might earn more throughout the game depending upon situations, good role-playing. The GM also gets a number of bennies equal to the amount of players that are at the table. In Savage Worlds, the base target number for any task is 4. That might go up or down based upon the situation. Shooting somebody at long range will incur a +4 penalty. One mechanic in Savage Worlds that makes the game more interesting is the raise system. Unlike in Dungeons & Dragons, where you have a binary system with a pass-fail mechanic, in Savage Worlds, for every 4 that you go over the base target number, you get a raise. If you roll really high, you might get multiple raises, increasing your damage, or your GM might come up with a particular perk for rolling so high if you're hacking into a system or you're trying to persuade somebody to your side. In keeping with the poker theme of using poker chips for bennies, initiative is not handled by a die roll, but is in fact handled by playing cards. At the beginning of an encounter, the GM will go ahead and deal a card to every wild card, including any that they're controlling, plus a card for any mooks or NPCs. Players will reveal their cards and they'll go by face value from ace all the way down to 2. If there happens to be a tie, such as 2 10s, it then goes in reverse alphabetical order. Spades, hearts, diamonds, and then finally clubs. The Joker, however, will trump any other initiative card. Anyone that draws a Joker will get to go at any point in the initiative order, interrupting any other player or NPC. They also get a +2 to any trait or damage roll. Combat in Savage Worlds is very similar to other game systems. Once initiative has been determined, a player will declare what their action is going to be, whether they're going to move to a particular location or if they're going to attack. If you're going to attack, you're going to pick the skill to use, whether it be fighting or shooting, and then you roll that plus your wild die. If you exceed the target number to hit, then you go ahead and roll damage. If the damage exceeds the opponent's toughness by 1 through 3, that opponent then becomes shaken. There's a very limited amount of things that they can do when they're shaken. On their next turn, they can make a spirit roll to try and unshake themselves. They can also spend a Benny to unshake immediately. If, however, you do 4 or more points of damage over the threshold, namely getting a raise, then that opponent starts to actually take wounds. Wounds get very nasty because they're cumulative. For every wound that is taken, that's a -1 to your pace and -1 to all trait rolls. Once you reach 3 wounds, you're unconscious. One of the things that you can do is spend a Benny and try and soak that. Namely, you're going to make a vigor roll and try and buy off that damage. All wild cards and extras will go through the initiative order until everyone has performed whatever their skill or attack is going to be, then a fresh round of initiative cards is dealt, and you repeat the process until the battle is over. There are two real flavors of combat in Savage Worlds. First, you do have Theater of the Mind. That is where the GM will describe the situation, and the players will tell the GM how they react. There might be a crude map or diagram to give the players a better idea of what they're looking at. Theater of the Mind is great for very quick combats. The second option is to use gridded combat. All ranges in Savage Worlds are based off of 5 feet, so is movement. 1 square on the map would equal 5 feet. You can go with a basic gridded map. You can also use terrain. Just depends upon how fancy or how creative you would like to get with the combat. Like most other role-playing games, combat is not the only path to resolution that the players have access to. There are also dramatic tasks. Dramatic tasks are a group task. They're usually timed and have a negative consequence if you are not able to complete them in that set amount of time. Typically, you're going to need to get at least 5 successes with the appropriate skill before the time runs out. Some dramatic tasks could be defusing a bomb, a tense negotiation, or perhaps escaping a villain's lair. If you have not accumulated your 5 successes before the time runs out, then the dramatic task fails and something bad typically happens. The bomb might go off, you might be recaptured, the ritual that you are attempting to cast fails. Savage Worlds does allow the players a lot of opportunity to role-play their ways out of situations, especially if they're very creative, and it can be a lot of fun to figure out a non-combat solution to get out of an encounter than just blasting or brute forcing your way out. Wildcards in Savage Worlds do not remain static. You do have the ability to advance your characters throughout the course of a campaign. At the end of every session, the GM will award between 1 and 3 experience points, possible bonus ones depending upon how well the players did or role-playing that was performed. Those experience points can be used to increase an attribute, or purchase a new skill, or increase an existing skill. You can buy a new edge, or you can actually spend experience points to buy off a hindrance. Typically, if you're going to buy off a hindrance, you do have to have some sort of role-playing or story element as to how you're able to get rid of whatever that particular hindrance is. While those experience points might be spent to purchase a new skill or an edge, you do want to keep a running cumulative total of how many you've earned. That experience point total will dictate what your rank is. You are going to start at a rank of Novice, which is 0 to 19 experience points, all the way through Legendary, which is a maximum of 80 experience points. If you're getting 3 a session, that's going to be a very long time before you do reach Legendary. If you're looking to get into Savage Worlds, you can pick up the Deluxe Explorers Edition for about $10 through multiple retailers, including Amazon and DriveThru RPG. The Deluxe Explorers Edition contains the full rules that you need to start play. Now, there are additional expansions that you can get to add additional rules, edges, hindrances, and additional flavor to the game depending upon what style of game you're looking to play. There is a fantasy companion with a bunch of additional monsters, treasures, spells, things like that. There's also a science fiction companion if you're looking to run something that's set in the far future or with more advanced technology. There's also a horror companion with more edges and hindrances that fall into the horror genre, along with additional rules for that kind of game. If you're looking to run something that's a bit more superhero flavored, there is the Savage Worlds Superpowers Companion. The Superheroes Companion contains new edges and hindrances, as well as rules to create lairs for your heroes or villains. If you're not looking to use any of the companions or the settings that are available for Savage Worlds, you also have the ability to create whatever you'd like. There are also plenty of resources out on the internet that you can review and borrow for your own campaign or your own setting, depending upon what you're looking for. I ran my own fantasy campaign for 2 or 3 years using just the Fantasy Companion and the Savage Worlds rulebook. Savage Worlds is indeed fast, furious, and fun, and I highly recommend the game to anyone that is looking to try something that is not Dungeons & Dragons. The cost of entry is relatively cheap at $10. Most players and GMs will already have a set of polyhedral dice, and almost everyone has a deck of cards floating around somewhere. For bennies, you can use poker chips or anything else that comes to mind. You just have to have something to represent the benny when it's going to be used, or if it's going to be handed out to the player characters. Those are my thoughts on Savage Worlds. What do you think about the game system? Do Do you have a particular setting that you like to play, or do you prefer to homebrew everything? Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video.